I'm here today to talk about the President's nominee to the Supreme Court, Sonia Sotomayor. I want to commend my Republican colleague, particularly Senator Jeff Sessions, for conducting a very respectful and civil hearing process for the nominee. This is something we haven't seen in a number of years here. They were respectful towards her. Even those who disagreed with her judicial philosophy showed courtesy and respect during the hearings, and it's something I very much appreciate. Our goal through this process has not been to block this nomination and to stop her from going to the Supreme Court. The votes have never been there to do that. What we have been trying to show is a pattern here by the Obama administration and the Democrat majority of moving towards more and more government control in all areas of our lives. We see it in the stimulus plan that instead of leaving money in the private sector, we take it away and spend it on things like turtle tunnels and other kinds of wasteful spending all across the country. Government spending, we're trying to manage the private economy. We see it in cash for clunkers, where we create an economic earmark for one sliver of our economy. At the same time, in this health care legislation, we're talking about adding taxes to the small businesses that create 70% of the jobs in this country. We're benefiting a few at the expense of many. This is economic central planning. It's a concept that has failed throughout history, yet we're trying again. And what we see in the President's nominee to the Supreme Court is this belief that our Constitution is inadequate, that we need to have judges on our courts, justices on the Supreme Court who add to it. The President has said that our Constitution is a charter of negative liberties. It tells the government what it can't do, but it doesn't tell us what we have to do. And the whole point of the Constitution is to limit what we can do. But the President considers it inadequate, and he is nominating people to the courts that will be activists, that will expand what the federal government does and make arbitrary decisions rather than those based on the Constitution. Unfortunately, I do rise today in opposition to the confirmation of Judge Sonia Sotomayor to the United States Supreme Court. I met with her personally, and I've watched the hearings, and I believe she is a very smart and gracious person with an inspiring personal story. But I also found her evasive and contradictory in her answers. On several issues ranging from judicial temperament to her infamous Wise Latino speeches, Judge Sotomayor experienced what we call confirmation conversions on many of her issues and simply walked away from a lot of her past statements and positions. And now, seeing her willingness to tell us what we want to hear, neither her testimony or her long record on the judicial bench can give the American people any confidence that she will rule according to the clear language and intent of the Constitution. Let me talk for a second about the Constitution versus precedent. I'm very concerned that Judge Sotomayor's repeated efforts to deflect questions by stating she relied on precedent to guide her decisions. I understand the circuit court judges are guided and even bound by Supreme Court precedent, but precedent is not the same thing as the Constitution, particularly on the Supreme Court. A judicial confirmation process that puts the constitutional interpretation outside the bounds of discussion is a waste of time. On issue after issue during her hearings, Judge Sotomayor, rather than giving her own opinion, simply offered the opinions of many other judges. We have no idea of what she really thinks. In one sense, this is fitting. The Congress routinely passes legislation that none of us read or understand, so perhaps it's consistent for us to nominate and confirm a justice that we don't understand what she actually believes. Judge Sotomayor may be very learned in constitutional law, but we rarely heard her actually mention the Constitution itself. This is a big problem for our judiciary and our system of checks and balances. In 1825, Thomas Jefferson said the federal judiciary was at first considered as the most harmless and helpless of all its organs. But it has proved that the power of declaring what is law has allowed it to slyly and without alarm sap away the foundations of the Constitution. What concerns me, as Jefferson observed, is that there are many confusing and contradictory precedents that can be used by judges to justify whatever decision that they want to make. Without the Constitution as the fixed standard, court decisions become very arbitrary, and we are ruled by the opinions of justices rather than the rule of law. When the law is unmoored from the Constitution, it becomes like the old schoolroom game of telephone. Some of you may remember it. One student says something to her neighbor, and on across the room until the secret reaches the other side of the class. And what do you know? The final message no longer even resembles the original. That's how precedent has worked in our court system. Every time the Supreme Court bases a decision on precedent rather than on the underlying Constitution, the original intent of the founders is lost and becomes distorted. There's nothing stopping a determined judge from finding a precedent that suits whatever they want to decide in any case before the court. Nor apparently is there anything that will stop Judge Sotomayor from unmooring her decisions not only from the Constitution, but from precedent itself, as she did in the Ritchie racial discrimination case and with regard to the fundamental right of citizens to own firearms. In the Ritchie case, she claimed she was following precedent, but her own colleagues on the circuit court refuted her claim. On the Second Amendment, she disregarded the Supreme Court's Heller decision and still refuses to acknowledge the right to bear arms for every American, that it is a fundamental right. Decisions like these understandably undermine the credibility of our judicial system. Americans are led to suspect that some judges are more interested in their particular outcomes rather than objectivity. Let me conclude with this. Judge Sotomayor is obviously a talented jurist, but I believe her when she says that she chooses her words very carefully. And her words, both in her testimony and throughout her career, undermine her claims to objective and impartial justice. I realize my view is the minority view here, and if Judge Sotomayor is confirmed, she will have my best wishes on a long and distinguished career. Given the available evidence, however, I cannot support her confirmation, nor the judicial philosophy that she will carry with her to the Supreme Court. I thank you, Madam President, and I yield back and note